What was it like when you first tried the experience, like for the first time or the final time, whatever the most kind of impactful moment was for you? What did it feel like seeing and being in the story that you had made rather than just watching it on a screen?
It was a little like for almost like the first like third of it, I forgot that I wrote it. Because there was
This
like
is
a
great.
there was like a good
Hire this
period
guy.
of time like
Yeah.
between like turning in the final draft, so to
Yeah.
speak, and then them going off and making magic. But there was like a chunk. So at first, the first time when the Watcher steps out and is really like corporeal, and I'll say like what an amazing job like ILM Immersive did, because like these characters like really do feel like they're there. And it's so weird, right? Because they're cartoons, and so the idea that like these
Yeah.
cartoons feel like they have presence and weight was just such an amazing magic trick. But like the first third of it, I was kind of just humming along and like not even remembering that I wrote this. And it wasn't until like certain turns of phrases that are very much like things me and Phil like to do that I was like, oh yeah, that's right, we did this. This was our fault.
I had a super weird onboarding to this experience because I'm currently in Portugal, and I was going through hoops to get my Vision Pro here. So when it came out, I was watching all the playthroughs on YouTube first. So I got to watch everyone else kind of play through it before I got a chance to play through it. And I was like, oh, okay, oh yeah, it looks pretty good. That looks pretty decent. Oh, that looks fun. That's great. That's cool. And then so having written it and then having watched it from afar, I thought I had a pretty good read on what the experience was like. Essentially, I was like, all right, I'm a pro at this experience. And then I got the headset, installed it, and it felt like an entirely like the sea change shift in reading or watching something 2D and being immersive is so fundamental for that. Even with all that kind of exposure, it still felt cool. I was like, how can I think this is cool when I'm so intimately and familiar with it? Like, how can I still be wowed by it at all? And that kind of really, yeah, it was. I was surprised and shocked.
Well, I think you've quite adequately described the idea of it being immersive, and like that it is a different medium, and it truly requires experience. Like to see the footage of this game on a flat screen does not tell the story of what it is like to be in it when the watcher is making eye contact with you.
Yeah. While
Like,
standing
that
in your
was
living room
one
or
of the
wherever you
most
are.
one of the most impressive things for me is the fact that the characters are looking at you, and like that makes it feel real because that is what people do. And like just lots of little touches like that make it an experience which is it's hard to grasp unless you have been in it, and it becomes like part of your memories. It's a very strange thing, but it's what makes this medium so exciting, I think.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Okay.
So you haven't. I mean, this is obviously a pretty special and a unique experience to build this. Seems far away from what you'd done before. Any interesting things you learned along the way about this? Like what where you came out of it and were like, oh, I never really thought about something like that, because you would think that this would be kind of a changing experience for both of you, where you'd be like, wow, how did we get here? And you have to solve some problems you never expected.
Let's see. So essentially, what were unexpected learnings from this
Yeah,
experience?
anything you learned, or maybe anything you wish you tried to do, and you're like, we can't do that.
um, I will say we a lot of our learnings we kind of ironed out in the initial stages, because again, like our inclination is to have people say things and do things to like tell the story. And our producer, David Bouchard, very much like try to drill this point into our heads like early on in the project, which is that like when people put on a headset and there's a new world around them, their attention and their appetite for dialogue and learning and kind of information whittles to like almost nothing, because you're just like a kid in the can. You're just here.
Yeah.
There's everything going on around you.
Sensory overload.
You're sensory overload. And so we had to kind of internalize a new kind of like appreciation for the ebb and flow of what a player is doing and when they're doing it and when they're receptive to things and when you can say kind of very heavy plot or story based information, or when you need to dial it back and say things that it's okay if a person didn't catch, right? Whereas when you're watching a movie, you expect that the audience is going to process 95% of the dialogue, right? Because you're just sitting there and you're paying attention, you're watching. In a immersive experience like this, that number drops like incredibly. So we just had to be very cognizant of that. So that was helpful to learn, if that makes sense.
I have two, and one is it's just a nice confirmation that story and emotionally connecting through characters and theme work, right? Like I think most people, even people who are watching on a flat version, kind of really grasp a lot of the philosophy of what we're really trying to get through with this piece, and the feelings of it. And so it's rewarding to see that storytelling like that works even when you do switch mediums. Secondly, I would say the big learning is that what seems really obvious to me because I'm writing it isn't obvious to once people make it, and that's good and bad. Like I was howling like a little child at some points about like, no, we're giving too many things away, people are gonna know, and like I was just wrong. Like people didn't know, and yeah, and it was I was shown that like no, like it's okay to put a little bit more of that stuff out there, and ultimately ends up more rewarding than to hold the mysteries of your story super close to your chest.
Speaking of the mysteries of the story, before we wrap up, I want to talk about the end. The snap moment, one of the coolest things I've ever done in a video game. If you are a huge MCU fan like I am, being able to enact that moment it gave me goosebumps as like you're now doing this, and the weight of that moment, like I know what that means and like what that does in the MCU. Just there isn't really a question as much as just say it was awesome. I loved it so much.
Thank you.
It was really great.
And that's the one branching choice in the whole thing is right there at the end. Is the snap determines which ending you see.
Yeah, what reality is like.
Yeah.
The snaps. I mean, I'm so happy to hear everyone respond to it. I don't know that what I would do if people were like, but I mean, for me, when this project came to us and we kind of understood that hand tracking was going to be our main push for interactivity, I was like, well, we got to do it. And it almost pushed the story to be about Infinity Stones, because I was like, what other chance in my lifetime am I going to get to reenact the Infinity Snap without any sort of like distant, like it's not on a controller, it's not on a, right? It is literally you're doing it. And I was like, I may not get another chance in my lifetime to do this, so I really gotta push on this and make it happen.
Just like from a technical perspective, I didn't even know that the hardware could detect that. Like, so that was also like really fun too. Like I didn't know. Like, if it was like a thing, if Apple said like, oh, and one of the ways that you deal with the UI is you snap your fingers, then I would have probably assumed that What If would have you do that. But like getting to that point and kind of you're just asked to do it, I was like, I've raised my hand, like, oh my god, I get to do it. It was really just an incredible moment.
It's magic, right? Yeah, because I all throughout the process, I remember like Ian was, I was like, we can do this, right? Because it has to work, and it has to work really well. And Ian was like, yeah, we got it. And I was like, okay, because it's got to be perfect, and it was.
Yeah, it was really, really cool.
Are there any little bits in the game? Or sorry, it's not a game. It's not a game. I've played this thing. It is an interactive story. That's the thing about it. It is an interactive story and not a video game.
Well,
which I think is good.
I will say,
there's
like
a broader
interactive
audience.
stories are a kind of more new genre of video.
You
game.
could call
Like-
it that,
like,
right?
Like they're a lot of they're called like interactive novels, that kind of thing.
Sure.
It's becoming more and more of a style of game. But
Right.
I understand the desire to call this an interactive story to just set expectations. It sets
Exactly.
expectations well for
Judge
people.
it for what it is.
But from my eyes, this is as much of a game as many games I have played. But like I get the idea of talking about it as a story. Sorry to interrupt you, Jason.
No, that's fine. I was the one who said the wrong word. Anything that you got to get in here that you just, I mean, again, I go back to the toy box. Anything in here that you're just happy that you were able to slide in a little something here or there that was maybe a favorite idea of yours, a favorite reference, something that you said, could we work this in? I mean, you mentioned Carol Danvers and the Nova Corps, which is something that I caught and laughed at because I used to read Nova when I was a kid. And so, and that character has not appeared in the films, but the planet and the uniforms had. And so to have that remix where that's where Carol ends up. But I was just wondering if there were any other, and again, the bubbling Winter Soldier pod was hilarious. I wonder if there were any little bits in there that you're like, I don't know if anybody's going to notice this, but I was happy we got it in.
I don't know if they're all super subtle like that, because I'm not a very subtle person. but I mean,
whatever makes you happy, really.
I was really giddy to be able to fit in someone saying "what if," and that cold open into the Marvel logos gives me chills every time I can watch it. I can do it.
Oh,
and,
being inside the Marvel logo. It just starts so great. Like
good.
so great. So great.
Yeah. And then I mean, Brad Winterbaum came to us about the Star Fox inclusion, and originally I was a little scared about it, but ultimately I was really happy that we got to play with that character. And so it's not an Easter egg, but I'm those two things I didn't expect going in, and I'm so thrilled to be able to do it.
What about you, Phil?
Yeah, there weren't many Easter eggs.
Or even just a reference that you were happy to get in there. Something you were happy.
There was just a moment I was really happy with, because I thought this was going to get cut. There's a moment where you finally meet the Scarlet Witch, and she has just, she has dismissed everyone. She sent everyone off to, various places. She's like sealing you all in the, and you go, it's like Oprah. It's like, you're in the Soul Stone, you're in the Soul Stone, you're in the Soul Stone. And she gets to you're in the Soul Stone, and, it's a super low moment, right? Like you've essentially lost and you're trapped forever. And I love that Vision, who has been like just trapped in here, who is, trying not to die, essentially. His wife is like wreaking havoc in the universe. And he just hits you with this sort of like very wry, like, so I see you've met my wife. And it's just such a very, I just was glad we were able to stick that in there.
It's good.
It was very real and unexpected for Vision. I was like, they're going to take this away from Vision, but no, it got in. So I was happy with that one.
Well,
how about you? What was your, this is kind of, cause you have such a great purview into both movies and games. I saw a tweet recently that was so interesting, and I feel stupid for never having noticed it, where someone said that a lot of the great kind of tech shifts have created a lot of the great IPs. And I forget who tweeted it, but it was something like 4-color printing press gave us Marvel Comics, and Sync and Sound gave us Disney, and CG gave us blue screen compositing gave us Star Wars, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, the context of this tweet wasn't this, but I wonder if immersive storytelling opens up the door for a new kind of IP. And, do you guys both love tech and story. Do you have thoughts about that? Is there maybe a type of story or a thing that, even just from this small taste of it, that like sparks your own curiosity about, like, oh, where else could this go that maybe we couldn't have done in other mediums and other platforms, or without this technology, if that makes sense? It's a big question. I should stall a little bit so you can mull it over.
Mike's pondering there.
Yeah, so I think
ponder.
Like if we look at what you did here with What If as like this is the beginning of what this kind of storytelling can be. While and Jason touched on it earlier, the complexity of branching narrative is always a huge thing. but I can imagine immersive branching narrative to be much more emotionally effective than in regular video games, because when you are in these immersive environments, you feel more active in your participation than when there is a controller that is the medium for you to participate. And I really wonder what the kind of morality stories that can be told in these environments, I think, could be much more emotionally effective than the typical types of video games that we have today. And so I can see something happening there, but of course it's a big, huge thing to deal with. But I think people are more likely to be emotionally effective of the decisions that they make if they actually feel like they're in the world with the people that they're making them with.
That, go ahead.
Oh,
I was going to say that's an interesting. I'm going to interrupt real quickly because we talked about that very specifically and kind of used The Last of Us as a reference point when we kind of briefly entertained the idea of doing a branching narrative up front. It's very difficult, and it's. I'm curious to see how other people balance this themselves. It's difficult to tell a story with an emotional arc like The Last of Us if you don't know what experiences the player is going to have along the way.
Yeah.
Right. So if they have free latitude to do whatever and say whatever, they might not get all of the key pivotal moments that'll make that final decision so emotionally impactful. So there's definitely there's an art to giving enough freedom to feel free, but narrowing down freedom enough so that the story can have all the emotional beats necessary to hit that emotional climax, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a great call.
As a child of the text adventure era, right? The idea of interactive narratives, I've always been kind of interested in it. So it's kind of fun to see it get to this scale, right? Like, oh my God, it's not just, it's like going from a book to a movie or a video game. It's just, it's a similar concept on a completely different level. I wonder, Mike said the emotional connections when you're in an immersive environment, it's not even just the characters. I keep coming back. This is probably a dumb idea, but I keep coming back to the idea of, do you remember everybody, there was this fad like 15 years ago, the alternative reality game idea.
Yeah.
Like we're doing a movie, but also you scan a barcode and go to a website, you can download a thing that you can scan and then it takes you here and all of that. And I wonder whether it's AR or VR, if there is a way to do narrative that is part of your immersive world. So the idea that if you're working in an augmented reality environment, there may be aspects of it that aren't really there, but that if you interact with them, they will lead to other things being generated later on, almost on an extended kind of narrative. And then the Vision Pro environments are so spectacular that I also think about that. Like, what if things happen in those environments or something like those environments where you could be in it, but you could get your work done, but somebody might come walk up to you on the beach, or something might wash ashore on that beach that leads to another kind of thing, whether it's a super heavy narrative or whether it's just a little bit of delight that unlocks something somewhere else. Because to me, the difference between playing a video game on a screen and being in something like the Vision Pro is that immersion, that you're somewhere else. And so anything that can take advantage of that, whether it's interactive narrative or like even the very limited supply of those immersive videos that Apple has put out so far, like you can see it's not like anything else. So what could you do with that? And I'm not quite sure what, but that was the first thing that came to my mind was, what if they were a little bit more, even lightly more interactive, or a narrative? Like a friend of mine back in the 90s did a short story that was done by email. So you signed up for it, and then you got a series of emails that were supposedly between two people talking to each other via email. And it was, you weren't participating in it, but time was part of the experience. The time between the emails was part of the story. And I think about, just weird ways of doing story that you could do in an immersive or an AR environment that you can't do in the real world, or at least without scanning a barcode that you got on a Mountain Dew can or something. So,
no, I mean, yeah, because all those, the environments, I don't know if you saw like in the latest Vision 2 docs, they kind of like released kind of like the guidelines for making your own environments, right? Like there's a little bit of like so there definitely, you can see that Apple sort of paving the way for that, so that there will be third-party environment kind of things, right? I think that the kinds of things that can happen in AR and mixed reality can be like if you're playing a video game and someone comes along and taps you on the shoulder, it doesn't mean anything to you. Or someone steps up to you and says hi in a game, it means nothing. But like you're saying, if you're in Bora Bora and a person walked up to you and said hi, like that is a transformative, experience for you, right? Like it'd be horrifying if you didn't know it was going to come, but but it's very fundamental, basic things get opened up. So yeah, I think that there's almost an extent to which, traditional games have been so hell-bent on sort of like becoming photorealistic and how many frames per second and like, what's the realest shooting game ever, that now we can sort of maybe step back to like very basic interactions. Like even like, like I think you referred to like the Zork and the Sierra Online games earlier. Like just walking around a cave and, finding a thing can be so much more engaging because of the platform that you're on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that there's a new old frontier there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Shout outs to Mountain Dew cans.
Yeah. I mean, you got to scan it to get your secret code for that, for some
Collect
movie
them
that's
all.
in and out of theaters for a week. And that's got
if you were a
thing in the
brand,
credits. And
Yeah,
that's right. Send in a self-addressed stamped envelope to this address. And that's how we had to do it back in the day. It was really slow. Well, Phil and David, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. I know, like the Myke especially was, we both really enjoyed it, and Myke was like pumped about this entire. That snap really got him, is what I'm saying. So I'm so glad that we got to talk to you about this very interesting thing that's like outside of your wheelhouse, and it's not like something that we've ever really seen, and it was a lot of fun. It was, and I hope there's more down the road from you guys and from ILM Interactive, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you for talking about it with us.
Thank you so much for having us. A real honor. Again, surreal to hear you guys and be able to talk back. Thank you so much for letting us be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Such a pleasure. I'm so glad that it landed. So yeah.